thanks everyone for coming. Project Drawdown did start in 2001. It started after the third assessment of the IPCC came out, and that's feedback. Thanks, Matt. Got it? Good to go. And I had read the summary reports of the first and the second one, and each one, of course, gets more pessimistic, and that's because it's consensus science, which means Venezuela, the Saudi Arabians, the Chinese at that time, and the Russians get to come and weigh in on the conclusions, and so you have to parse them and sort of read between the lines because you know it's actually worse. And but to me, it was like, okay, there's a problem, cool. But then what came out later was, and I'll show this in a minute, was the Carbon Mitigation Project. And that made me pessimistic. In other words, it was the solutions that made me pessimistic, the solutions that are being proffered and offered. Drawdown means the first time on a year-to-year basis where greenhouse gases peak and go down. And what we wanted to do in Project Drawdown is to name the goal. If you don't name the goal, fat chance you're going to hit it. And mitigation, stabilization, reduction, zero, cool. But as Pete said, it's a little bit like Thelma and Louise in slow motion. In other words, we're still going over the cliff, but we're going to slow down, you know, because the climate doesn't care about that. And so there it is. It's the only sentence I'll read to you. This is the problem. And so that's 400,000 years. Human beings have never been here when it was over 300 ppm. Okay. I mean, the last time temperatures exceeded 300 ppm was in the Miocene period 14 million years ago, right? So anybody who says that they know what's going to happen it's interesting, but it's complete guesswork, really, from a scientific point of view. We don't have a basis to understand what's going to happen or the rate at which it will happen. So talk about adaptation, like adapting to this. This period here, this is the Eemian period, 125,000 years ago. There was crocodiles in the Thames River Delta, because it was 20 feet higher. The oceans, there was elephants and giraffes in Germany romping around. There was crocodiles in Alaska. I mean, that was 125,000 years ago. And that was only, as you can see, it was 280, 285, 290 ppm. And we went soaring past that a long time ago. So I'm just saying we're in Terra Nova. So this is what Drawdown looks like. I mean, just theoretically. In other words, it shows a point at time when there's an inflection. And that's what we got to aim towards. So the question for Project Drawdown is, could we do it? Could we do it with solutions that were existing, that we understood, that were well documented, that I call them W.W. Granger solutions. In other words, you can get them now, everybody can get them, as opposed to, you know, pie in the sky. And we were able to do that with some fantastic support, and I want to really call out, we have staff here. Chad, who is head of our research, is here. Our founding, where is she? The beautiful Amanda Ravenhill, who founded Drawdown with me. We first talked about it on my birthday 4 years ago, is that right? And said we want to do a book that would provoke people, and so that was, I think, the conversation. Crystal is here. Audrey is here. I don't know if Lenadra is here, but we have, I don't see her. But anyway, oh, a fellow. We have one fellow. Oh, Audrey's here right in front of me. I'm sorry. Oh, my God. Anyway, and also we have quite a number of advisors. I might not list them all, but Colin LeDuc is here, I think. David McConville is here. David Gensler is Noah Daesh is here, maybe. I haven't looked at the whole audience, but and I'm missing someone. And we have some really great supporters here. Justin Rosenstein. We have our chair, Lisa Gauthier. And it just is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we felt when we started Drawdown, was that it should be a collaboration. It should be us, it should be we. It should be we reflecting back to we what we know, as opposed to, a small group saying, listen, we know better. We don't know better at Drawdown. We do not know better at all. We don't say that. And this was what inspired me. This is called the Carbon Mitigation Initiative at Princeton. It came out in 2001. As I said, the IPCC third assessment was okay. This was the global wedges. Do you remember the wedges? Okay. Yeah. And this is the 15 solutions that comprise the 8 wedges. And you could choose any of them, and you could have a wedge. I don't know if there's wedges in nature, but anyway, they thought there were. And so here they were. And I looked at that, and I thought, what are they thinking? Because these are all the ones that were deeply, deeply underwater financially. And what they were saying is they were asking the most conservative companies in the world, energy, utility companies, car companies, to build, create things that would absolutely be money losers, and money losers for a long time. And it was like, well, that's not a solution, And that's when I began to say to friends, like, we need a list of what we can do and what the impact it'll have over 30 years and what it would cost, really. Let's figure it out. And let's go from there. And I talked to NGOs, environmental NGOs, and asked and asked and asked, and they said, great idea, we don't do that. We don't have that expertise. And I certainly didn't have it either, and so there it died. But if you go Google the top 10 solutions, this is today, top 10 solutions to climate change. Is Brett Victor here? I saw him on the guest list. He wrote a really great paper, a technologist. What can a technologist do about climate change? But anyway, he called these proverbs. That's what they are. They're not solutions. Proverbs are true, like love your mother, things like that. But they're not solutions. Loving your mother is not a solution. It's an act, okay? And so this is Google. This is right now. And like move closer to work, things like that, Use power strips at home. I mean, and so this is what really can oppress us when we think about the most incredible problem humanity has ever faced, and this is Scientific American and Union of Concerned Scientists. And then how do we get the news about global warming? Badly. I mean, you may not, you're very literate, but most of the world gets it in a sensationalized way. It doesn't mean the science isn't correct. The science is correct, but my gosh, I mean, the clickbait is also there. Wife smashes husband's head with frog ornament. And here we have, the towers going down under a tsunami in London, and this is, he was alive and well yesterday, doing the same thing. Oceans, 10,000 years. This is Peter Bates' paper from Oregon State, a great paper. And then it gets sensationalized, And again, 20 things you never knew you could do with Coca-Cola, And so who are we? This is part of who we are. We didn't have any money at all. And no one offered. And so Chad and Amanda, we sent out a call all over the world to students and scholars to be our research fellows. And they got paid not very much, a stipend of $1,000, $2,000, And they are extraordinary people. And they did the core research in Drawdown. And they're from 22 countries, 6 continents, 40% women, half PhDs, all advanced degrees. And that was the first tranche of us being a we. And the second tranche is we have 120 advisors. They are geologists and botanists and climatologists, but they're also artists and activists. They are politicians. Some are very well known, some are not known at all. They're teachers. They're just extraordinary people. And they reviewed, not everyone, but they reviewed everything we did in terms of the content of the book itself. And what do? We do the math. That's what we do. We do the math. The IPCC has done the math, and what's going to happen if we don't act. That math is extraordinary. The IPCC is the most, no scientific achievement humanity has ever done equals or even comes close to what the IPCC has done. And there's no second place in terms of scientific achievement. So this is a solution. And we mapped, measured, and modeled the most substantive solutions to global warming. Well, the first process was to get a lot of them and winnow them out, and then in some cases we would model them, and then we would winnow them out, and we would find out they didn't hold up. But slowly but surely, we got to the point where we had 100 solutions. 80 of them, as I said, are W.W. Granger. 20 are what are called coming attractions, which are solutions that are validated scientifically, but there's not data, economic data, or even carbon impact sufficiently for us to model it. But we still have them in the book, and we have one of the coming attractions sitting over here. So what we did is we ranked them according to impact, carbon, or carbon equivalence, CO2 equivalence by 2050. What would be the reduction? And that could be reduction by avoided, that was don't put it up there in the first place, or by sequestration, that was drawing it back in to the soil, into forests, into living systems. And then we also calculated the net cost being how much would it cost, what is it replacing? What would we have had to do if we didn't do geothermal? And so the net cost can be higher or lower. So anyway, this is what you'll see. I'm going to show you several solutions, a number of them. But that's what we show in the book. Now we have more data than that in the models. So that's not all the data, but this is what we put in the book. This one is called improved rice production. Rice is one of the large sources of methane emissions because when you flood a field, it's an anaerobic situation for the grasses and whatever under the organic life underneath it, and you get methanogenesis, you get methane production. Improved rice production means you actually take the water off in the middle of the cultivation, and you actually reintroduce oxygen to the soil and to the microorganisms, and then you flood it again. It actually can reduce methane production by 50 to 70%. And it improves productivity. You get more rice. Actually, the costs are lower. And you see here that there's no cost. And the reason there's no cost is because all it takes is a farmer walking across the field to his neighbor and teaching. There's no actual capital cost whatsoever to change how we grow rice. This is wind turbines. This is offshore. And again, it shows the ranking. This is not Photoshop. It's the real deal in Norfolk and the shoals, the Sheringham Shoals in Norfolk. And it's 22. That's offshore. We'll get back to onshore. This is coastal wetlands. And I'm just going to go through these. This is nuclear, number 20. Some people criticize us for even having nuclear. Our whole method was to be without bias. In other words, if we started saying, oh, we don't like this one, and we do like this one, it's over. Because then how would you trust us, any of our numbers, or any of our methodology, or any of our math? So whether you like it or don't like it, that's your choice. We did write, however, in the book about nuclear and said it's a regret solution. And how do we know it's a regret solution? Because they've already happened. and there's a long list. We just talk about it again, but we try to treat it objectively. The fact of the matter is, in China, nuclear is growing significantly. It's hogtied here and now even in France, but nuclear is growing. But it doesn't rank, I think, as high as people expected. This is rooftop solar. And another thing we tried to do was to really mix up the imagery, so it wasn't cliches. This is an Uru woman on Lake Titicaca with her daughters on a straw island who had used kerosene on a straw island. And she's got her first solar panel. And so what we did want to do is show, you know, a suburb in Atlanta with a drone shot over, you know, it's like, ugh, you know, boring. This is educating girls. This is one of the most important solutions, number 6. And I think, yeah, anybody who knows the girl effect and all, I mean, it's very straightforward. That is, girls are taken out of school pre or at puberty, and then they're married off by their culture, by their family, or all the above. And they have on an average of 5 children per woman, okay? Now, what's happened also is that woman no longer has the choice to become a woman. The choice has been made for her, right? How she becomes a woman. So she hasn't chosen to have 5 children, she's having 5 children. There's a real difference. And so we'll get back to this in a minute because it's interesting. This is forest protection. This is the Great Bear Forest in British Columbia that was just set aside finally. Yeah, after so much work from RAN and Green, so many organizations. I mean, it's just fantastic. St. Prince William was there. Wasn't he there in September, I think? Yeah, and to ribbon cutting. And this is the Kermode bear, of course, you know, which is eating salmon, feasting on salmon. So we're not just protecting forests, but what we also show here is really how much CO2 or carbon, either way you want to look at, 300 billion tons of carbon, or 896 gigatons of CO2 is being protected by, that's there, the biomass above and below. This is reduced food waste, number 3. Number 3. It was like, who knew? I mean, we just did the math. I mean, and what I think you'll find is that when we're printing the methodology in the website, we didn't have enough room here, but we actually always had a bias towards the conservative. Everything we did, you know, in terms of sensitivity analysis for median projections, we based our data on the IEA, on World Bank, on WHO, on IPCC, on YASA, on ARENA. We use institutions that have far more researchers than we will ever have. And so that's our baseline reference case. On the carbon side, we always use peer-reviewed data, okay? So we didn't use anecdotes, or I believe, or I think, and so forth. And the whole area of climate solutions has been really, I think, polluted, if you will, or not polluted, but in a sense, dominated by people's beliefs. They believe this and they assert it, you know, and it's great for people to assert things, but it's not math, it's not data, it's not necessarily true. And here is the number 4 solution, plant-rich diet, right? Now, this doesn't mean vegan or vegetarian. It can be. It's your choice. What it means is less meat, and less meat to the point where it's healthy. 60 grams of beef is not a protein of beef is not a healthy diet, okay? And it also includes raising the caloric intake of people in the developing world to 2,500 calories and raising their protein intake. Still, with that, the reduction is extraordinary. And we can't calculate the cost because it's so wildly different all over the world and what people choose and eat. I actually want to acknowledge Chad here, by the way, Chad Upham, who did these slides. Right, he's right here. I forgot. Oh. Tropical forests, number 5. Not much to say about that except, oh yeah. And this is silvopasture. It's basically trees and grass together. You can do it either way. You can do the trees and then the grass, or the grass and then the trees, but they both have a fantastic effect in the productivity of the grass, the rate at which ruminants or other animals fatten, and the rate of carbon sequestration is extraordinary. This is regenerative agriculture. In this case, there's such a big tiff about defining regenerative agriculture. We tried to define it, and we also included organic agriculture in this definition. If we didn't, we would have trouble measuring it. And again, we have to use peer-reviewed data, papers and so forth. This is managed grazing. There's so many words for it: AMP grazing, rotational grazing, holistic resource management, and all those people are fighting over the terms. We're not. We just tried to basically measure what the impact would be. And this is an area, in almost all the land use areas, I think what you'll find is that the science lags actually the techniques that are being developed, actually, and the knowledge. And at the same time, you get people sort of having anecdotal results from a farm or ranch or so forth, and then projecting them out as if that went global. It could, reverse global warming in 10 years. I mean, you had Alan Savory at a TED Talk saying we reverse it in 10 years, So you have, what you have here is a lot of beliefs being put out there. And again, we wanted to say, okay, let's do the math. What's really true here? And can you guess what this is? Thank you. It's household recycling. This is a Dasatak woman in Somalia who lives near where they're building a bridge across the river. And they built a bar, and so she and others went there and pick up all the bottle caps and the SIM cards and whatever they find and make headdresses and jewelry from it. And now they sell it to boutiques in France. This is women smallholders. Smallholders, 80% of the food is produced in small farms. The idea that big ag feeds the world is complete poppycock. What they do is they feed cattle. And they grow soy and corn, or they grow palm oil to put in your cosmetics and to put in your food. And that 20% does not feed the world. It feeds Monsanto, it feeds Syngenta, it feeds big companies, but it does not feed the world. It's actually smallholders that feed the world. 43% of the smallholders are women. And so this solution is simple. It's women getting the same support, instruction, seeds, and tools that men get. That's all it is. And when they do, then the yields rise, harvests increase, and there's less pressure on land. This is electric bikes, and he's a bike mechanic in Berlin. This is nutrient management, which is, basically we over-fertilize, and it runs right down the Mississippi and other rivers into our oceans and causes algae blooms and kills off fish and so forth. And this one, can you guess what this is? It's so cute. This is under the transport sector. It's telepresence. So this is Price Waterhouse in Toronto. At least the guy standing on the carpet's in Toronto. The guy on the iPad is from Prague. And so he can log on from Prague into Toronto and get on this little sort of modified Segway with an iPad on top of it and scoot around the office and show up and, hello. and if you're having a meeting, he'll be there. You could be right back there right now, like, hi, and participate. And of course, it saves us from shipping protoplasm around the world, which is the idea. And this is multi-strata agroforestry. There's several different types of agroforestry that we modeled. Tree intercropping is one of them. Silvopasture is one of them. This is multi-strata, where you have many different types of trees and perennials and grasses and annuals together. And again, the rate of carbon sequestration on multi-strata is quite extraordinary. So what's surprising us? Well, everything surprises, first of all. We were so surprised that Chad and I go, we better get together. Did we make some big mistake? And doubtful, given the methodology, but it so surprised us. Once we got the data, I was talking to a friend who is a kind of a household name in climate, and many of you would know this person. And she's a friend, and I said, gosh, we're so surprised, we're shocked at what we found. And I had kidded her about COP21 in Paris, and I said, you know, I don't think anybody in Paris can name the top 10 solutions to climate change in any order. And we laughed and joked about it. We couldn't have named it either, by the way, so I'll make this clear. We just knew that no one knew. And we doubted anybody in Paris knew too. And then when I talked to her, I said, my gosh, we just got the results. You know, I said, I don't think anybody in the world knows the top 5 solutions to global warming. And she said, what are they? And this is 30 years, professor, published, lecturer. Okay. I said, you tell me. And so she did. And she said, well, first there's this, and then that, and this, well, it could be mass transit. No, it'd be EVs. And she went around and this and that, and so she finally coalesced a list of 5 of them. And she said, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And she said, how did I do? And I said, it wasn't the point of the question. The point of the question is, look how long it took you to come up with the name of 5 solutions that you thought might be the top 5. And you are in the 1,000th of 1% of all people on this planet in terms of understanding climate change and global warming. So what do you think the rest of us know? We don't know. We absolutely don't know. And then she said, well, did I get them right? I said, no, they're all wrong. But not wrong, they just weren't right, you know what I'm saying? They weren't the top 5. And then I did it 2 more times to 2 more household names, by the way, and one of them got one of them right, okay? So 1 out of 15. And these are the people we look to and should, by the way, in terms of their knowledge, their background, their experience. So when we map these solutions, it's not like we're kind of weighing in there and saying, we got a better idea. There was no idea at all. So when we say, and you'll see the cover of the book, it says, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. Well, that was easy. No one's ever proposed a plan. We could have said the most beautiful plan, the most extraordinary plan, any adjective we wanted. We can take the high ground because there's no one there, right? And then plan, that title of the book, by the way, came from an intern from Stanford at Penguin Random House in the summer. And we were there. He sent it in as the verso for the back cover when we sent out the galleys. We didn't have galleys, it turns out. It was digital, but nevertheless. And it said the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. And I said, oh, no, we don't do plans here. We map, measure, and model. That's what we do. But then it's just sitting there on my desk, and I was going, oh, gosh, I think he's right, you know? But we didn't make the plan. We found it. And this is really important to understand. We didn't make it. We found it. It's here. That humanity has a collective wisdom that's in effect. Every solution that we modeled is scaling. We didn't model ones that were dead in the water. They're all scaling. Our projections of their growth were based on what has happened so far here to date. Our numbers in terms of costs and savings were tamped down in terms of costs going down over time. We use very conservative numbers. We got criticized by our fellows and by, not fellows, by our advisors and by our outside expert reviewers. And it was a consistent criticism, which is you're too conservative, you're too conservative. It's exactly the criticism we wanted. Because any other criticism would basically undermine our credibility. And these guys just did amazing work, the fellows and Chad and Crystal. I mean, so the plan, what we're saying, and you don't hear this, is that humanity has, there's a collective wisdom. It's not top down. It's not from Paris or Marrakesh. Not that what they're doing isn't extraordinarily important, but that's not where it's coming from. It's not coming from the bottom either. It's coming because when you look top bottom, you're thinking in a different way. If it's a sphere, this is the Earth, so forth, It doesn't work that way. It's coming from everywhere, everywhere. And it's coming up, rising. And this is what surprises. Food is bigger than energy. Who knew? And look at, we'll publish all the data, methodology. Anybody can come and say, oh, you're wrong. I love it. We would love it. But hundreds of people have seen this, you know. I mean, it's like the data is robust and conservative. And the thing is, what do you hear about every time about climate change and global warming? Energy, 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 energy. You always hear about energy. Understandable. 62% of the CO2 up there is from combusting fossil fuels. So of course. But that's not the way it works to heal it. And there they are. There's the top 20. Screenshots available. There was a contest in 3 Ivy League colleges to name the top 5, and I think when you post it tonight, so you just blew that whole contest, but it's okay. And here, food, 8 of the top 20. Right? Energy, right? 5. Very, very important. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's so important. But 5. Solar is number 8. You combine it with rooftop, and then it's number 6 or 7. Okay. Reason we don't combine things like this, or onshore or offshore wind, is because they're very different. And so we can't model them in the same model. Number 1 is refrigerants, HFCs. Number 1 solution. We were a little disappointed in some ways. It's like, oh. HFCs, the Kigali Agreement, the amendment to the Montreal Protocol that happened last year. And they conservatively said 70 gigatons. What we included was taking these mounds of air conditioners and refrigerators all over the world and actually decommissioning the refrigerants that are in there instead of having them go up into the atmosphere as the copper wears out or is taken away. And here is women and girls, number 6 and number 7. Now, what's interesting about this is you'll notice that the gigatons are the same, 59.6. Actually, the reason they're the same is we split it down the middle. That is what happens if there is truly family planning in this world, which is instead of 10.8 billion people in 2050, there's 9.7. There's 1.1 billion people less. Now, the pathway to that is very different. Educating a girl is going to take a different path. A family clinic, a family planning clinic, is about reproductive health and choice and rights and support. So we modeled them differently, but we couldn't figure out how to allocate the results between them, and so we just split it down the middle. But here's the important thing. Add them up. It's the number 1 solution. Empowering girls and women is the number 1 solution to global warming. It's not a solar panel. It's a woman. Think of it. Yeah, wow, we were just like, okay. You know, and these numbers, however, are conservative. The World Bank has it at 160 gigatons in 2050. We have 119.2. Why do they have it higher? Because they used the impact on land. There was be less impact, less deforestation. We didn't put it in there. We made a choice to not include it in order to say what I'm saying to you. It's so conservative, that number, and it's still number 1. So it's not like tippy-toe, it's number 1, and no, it is robustly number 1 solution. And remember this one. This was the Carbon Mitigation Initiative from Princeton. This is what it looks like in reality. Okay, and what does it look like? It looks like nature. It looks like this is what we're doing. And there's a kind of a sense like, well, we should just focus on these big ones, the 80-20 rule. We should focus on the top 20% of the solutions because they have 80% of the impact. They do, okay? But that's not true. We should focus on them all. Because if we're going to achieve drawdown, that last 20% is what puts us over the top. So what I'm saying here, there's no such thing as a small solution. This idea that somehow we should all go to one side of the ship and focus on the big solutions is kind of, well, it's very male, put it that way. So is drawdown possible? Yeah, it is. Drawdown because of this, and this is stomata, stoma, and guardian cells. When you lift up a bunch of leaves, you have 100 million in your hands. What they do is they open and close. Why? When? How? They computer modeled stomata recently, and they were surprised to find out that stoma actually can have memory about weather. They can go back in time, what's going on in terms of weather. They can certainly measure the amount of humidity that's in the air. If a stomata is closed all the time, the plant dies. Because this is where CO2 comes in, which they eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This is where the water goes out, however. So if it's open all the time, it dies. If it's closed all the time, it dies. So it has to open and close in a very intelligent way. Otherwise, the plant dies. Go out to the forest. Go anywhere and look at all those plants. They're brilliant. They really are. Furthermore, they can hear the dawn chorus. Okay, like, oh, it's morning. Okay, not only that, they understand the moisture in the plant, the roots, and the soil. And with that calculation and the ambient temperature, they decide when to open and when to close. They, or whatever they are, or whatever. I mean, and that's what stomata do. And when they eat CO2, they're drawing down carbon. Okay, this you've seen. Whoops, we're going backwards. Oh, we missed a slide. Oh, it's okay. This is the book, quickly. There's the title. We talked about that already. This is our crew, not all of our crew. There's pages in the back. This is our client. We knew who our client was all the time, so we never confused about who we were working for. We have a whole thing on language. Language is very important. The way the science on climate change is extraordinary. The language is just horrible. Horrible. Decarbonization, like that's the problem, not the solution. We decarbonize, we put it up there. That's the name of the problem. We want to recarbonize. Carbon's not our enemy, it's our ally. We talk about negative emissions. That's science speak for drawing down carbon. I checked, in every language in the world, negative emissions means nothing. It means nothing. It's like a negative tree or a negative chair. What's a negative chair? It's a negative emission. This is language that's being used by science. Even Cristiano Figueres is using this. I mean, this is language that's going to go right over people's heads. And so what we try to do in Drawdown is clean up the language so that it's accessible to everyone. So there was a ninth grader or a pipe fitter or a farmer or a brilliant professor. We don't care that it was everybody could understand what we're talking about. So we use methane, we didn't say CH4, we didn't use acronyms, we made it accessible. And we stopped using war metaphors. No fight, no battle, no slashing, no combat. You see these things, I saw it, I won't name the group, it's a huge organization about stopping climate change. Stop climate change, give us money. That's the last thing in the world you want to do is stop climate change. First of all, you can't. That's for starters. Second, you want the climate to change. It changes every second. It's like saying stopping ocean currents or wind or sunshine. It's not going to happen. What we can do is reverse global warming. That's what we want to do. And if you say you're going to fight climate change or fight this or the war on, what you're saying is I have a dualistic mind and there's other out there. There's something other, and that is the mindset that caused the problem in the first place. is not the mindset that's going to solve the problem. And so we really address language that way. This is just part of the dashboard of a model, just to give you a sense that this is the dashboard. This is like, on your car. This is not the model. This is the inputs and the outputs, and this is what a page looks like. And we have essays. It shows you the difference between planting annuals. Those are annuals up there. Perennials, which one draws down more carbon and keeps it in the soil. So many of the scientific studies done on managed grazing and sequestration was done where they studied the top 8 inches of soil. It's like, and they said, no, it doesn't really work, it doesn't do much. The science wasn't good. These are coming attractions. This is marine permaculture. Brian Van Herzen, the inventor, is here tonight. You can talk to him afterwards. It's brilliant. It's 1 kilometer square structures made of PET, which does not dissolve in the oceans, which is a good thing and a bad thing in this case. It's a good thing in this case. And pumps that are actuated by the rise and fall of the water that go down with tubes to bring up the thermocline, the cold, nutrient-laden waters, and into the structure. And within a very short time, you get phytoplankton, zooplankton, you get algae, you get kelp, you get forage fish, you get feeder fish, and onwards. You create the whole trophic pyramid. Boom. You create ecosystems in weeks. And nothing sequesters carbon faster than kelp. Nothing does that. There's much more to it. It's really brilliant. This is hydrogen boron fusion. I don't know if Saul Griffiths is here. He's the physicist in the room. We talked about this years ago. I was so inspired by Stuart, by the way, and Saul, both Saul's presentation at the Long Now. I don't know how many years ago that was, but it was just such a brilliant presentation. The graphics are fantastic, and the math was really equally so. Hydrogen boron fusion, I've been following for 11 years as a journalist. They have 1 more milestone to go. It's easier than the last 2. It's, from their point of view, I'm not going to sell it to you. They were on the cover of Time magazine a year ago, November, because they achieved long enough. That's the hardest milestone for fusion, is to keep it in place and not have it go away and touch anything. Once you've got that, then it's a matter of temperature only. Just temperature. And temperature, they think that's not a problem. It's in Metro Margarita, and they were in stealth for 17 years because they know that fusion is a place you put lots of money and bury it and never see it again. They knew had 0 credibility. Founded by Glenn Seaborg, Nobel Prize winner, fusion expert. But go there, talk to them. They have 140 scientists, I don't know how many languages, 30 or 40 languages. No one leaves. No one leaves. They're unrecruitable. They're so on the case. They so believe that they will have clean baseload power in 20 to 24 months. And this is repopulating the Mammoth Steppe. This also, yes, Long Now did a beautiful piece. If you read in the Long Now about repopulating the Mammoth Steppe, it's just a brilliant observational science. Sergei Nikita-Zimov, biologists living in the subarctic area of Siberia, really walking it and looking at it from a point of view of an observer as opposed to what the borrowed science was. The borrowed science was the animals were all destroyed in the end of the Ice Age, and they said no, they were hunted down by people. You bring the animals back. This is reindeer, but the Yakutian horses, the muskox, etc. You bring them back, and what they do in the winter is they brush the snow away to eat, and you brush the snow away, and the ground temperature goes down by 2 degrees centigrade. You're protecting the methyl hydrates in the permafrost. We melt that. It is game over, no question about it. It's just a brilliant, brilliant solution. The Mammoth Steppe was one time the biggest grassland and the largest collection of animals in the world, and ruminants and other animals. So, and a cow walks onto a beach. It's kind of like a panda bear walks into a bar. I named it. I'm proud of that. That's it. This is a farmer in Prince Edward Island saw that his cows were eating seaweed or made more milk. They're more productive. The question is why? He went to a scientist. He said, well, they must not be producing as much methane because methane is so inefficient. The enteric fermentation is so inefficient in terms of metabolism. And so they fed a whole bunch of seaweed to the cows, and sure enough, it went down. They measured it exactly. It went down further, except it was too expensive and too cumbersome, so they knew it wasn't a solution. And they heard of a scientist in Queensland who was doing the same work. They researched and they found an algae, Asparagopsis taxiformis, which you feed it to a ruminant at a 2% rate in their feed. In the laboratory, fermentation goes down 99% in a laboratory rumen. Sheep, so far, it goes down more than 70%. So now we have Brian there with marine permaculture. We have two coming attractions who have met each other, and they're raising money, the marine permaculture people, to grow the Asparagopsis taxiformis as a business. And by the way, JP Morgan's over there, so if you want to talk to these guys, they're here. This is building with wood. Somebody said a big solution is embedded carbon. I'll say Yale University, and we don't model this stuff. They said if we build our skyscrapers out of wood, which are, by the way, less flammable than steel and concrete, but that's I know it's counterintuitive, but it's true. That it will have at least a 14% reduction in total carbon emissions on the planet. And this is Yale. I mean, they're being built. There's a 20-story building being built now. There's a 13-story one extant, and they're going up to 35 stories and higher. They're light. They're really light. Steel or concrete buildings. Saw the World Trade Tower. It went down by weight. It was the weight of the top floors that destroyed the building. It wasn't the airplane. The airplane destroyed those floors for sure. But once those beams were gone, it's like dominoes, This is autonomous vehicles. Whoops, don't have to say much about that in San Francisco. A lot of controversy about this. It could go other ways, Daniel Nocera, he was a deadhead. It's so interesting about Daniel. And the Grateful Dead did something really interesting. They were the first music sharing institution in the world. They let everybody record and share from the beginning. And he thought there should be energy sharing, that we should have the same ability with energy. So he developed an artificial leaf that produces hydrogen in water with no inputs. It's just the catalyst. And he's been talking about that for a long time. I didn't think it was much of a solution because I don't know what you do with hydrogen bubbles without a compressor and fuel cell. But he met a biologist, and she pointed out that there's algae that actually converts hydrogen to a fuel, a combustible fuel. And that's where they're going. No inputs, no energy, no electricity. That's a really great. And is there a business case? Yeah, I get that asked quite a bit. Is there a business case for reversing global warming? I want to know if there's a business case for double glazing the planet. I mean, is there a business case for destroying the oceans? Is there a business case for, this question is so odd. We have to ask the question, why isn't there a business case, or why hasn't there been a business case? The culprit here is business economics, not the Earth. And this idea that somehow if we restore the Earth, that we're going to basically not have a good business just simply isn't true. One thing we did see, though, I have to say, because we did the numbers, and I think, and Chad here is nodding, I think that over those 2.5 years, we just saw kind of a phase change. I actually think that pretty much in terms of energy, certainly wind and solar, I think in terms of regenerative agriculture in other areas, that now basically the cost of the solutions is lower than the cost of the problems, or the profit from the solutions is greater than the profit causing the problems. And I think we're in this transition right now. And I think some of these solutions like solar and wind and ag solutions are going to grow like crazy because it makes more money, there's more productivity, it's cheaper, it just check all the boxes. It's not from altruism at all. It's just years and years of a cost reduction and improved technology. And last, I don't have it with me, but I don't know if one of our most famous scientists in the United States is Matt Damon, and but for those of you who saw The Martian, you remember the last part, and he's older, he's back, and he's talking to wannabe astronauts, you know, and the young, you know, and here's the wise, you know, sage, and he says to them, he chastens them, he says, look, you know, when you're up there, you think you're going to die. Absolutely, you think you're going to die. And he says, space doesn't care. And you can put, climate doesn't care, right? And he said, what you have to do is do the math. You do the math, and you solve one problem, then you solve the next one, and then you solve the next one. And if you do that, you get to come home. And that's really Drawdown. We have the math. We know how to solve the problem. Let's come home. That's it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Deborah Nucky and I work in the clean energy sector. And I'm curious, with all those different clean energy solutions, if onshore wind is the number one, why not head 100% towards that and just dump the others? Why split it, and is it based on where it maxes out? Why divide it at all?
Onshore wind is number two. If you combine onshore and offshore, they're number one. If you don't count girls and women, and then they're number one. We're not trying to split, we're trying to measure. So it's about measurement, it's not about splitting. It's about the economics of on and offshore is so different. And even the turbines that are being used on and offshore are different because of the issues of assembling and maintenance, you know, out in the North Sea versus on land. So we're not trying to split anything. And we do have, and I didn't show it here, we have 3 scenarios. And if you add up everything you saw tonight, you know, in the book, all 80, it does not achieve Drawdown. Okay. And actually, I was pretty pleased about that because we didn't set about doing this with working backwards, say, okay, here's Drawdown, this is what we have to do to achieve it. That's more like a proposal, right? And then you game the numbers. So then we have in the book, and I didn't show the slide now, we have a second scenario, which is the Drawdown scenario in 2050. And that shows a dramatic increase in renewable energy, in particular in wind, because, you know, we just see that as being extremely robust in terms of cost and take up. Then we have another scenario, which is in optimum. We just optimize several things, large things, particularly renewable, but that's not all. And that we have Drawdown in 2045. So when you see it, you can see the different scenarios and what that means in terms of each technology. Yeah.
I'm Barry Cates. So that was the good news, and it's really great to hear how you're thinking about that. How are you thinking about the bad news?
How are you thinking about it?
Well, I'm thinking about some bad news that rolled out of Washington, D.C. from the tweeter-in-chief on Tuesday. How much damage are we capable of doing before some of the good news begins to kick in?
Very little.
Think so?
First of all, that was what he says and what he does are 2 different things. That was a review. That review will take a year or more. When the review is done, if he goes through with what he wants to propose, which is the rollback, you have to understand the Clean Energy Plan was never instituted. It's been in court for 2 years. So it was never instituted. So he can't roll it back because it never happened. Second, when the review happens, then the attorneys general all over the country have said, we're just waiting for you because they're going to sue the pee out of it. And that's going to be tied up for another 3 or 4 years. Nothing he said yesterday is going to happen in his administration except the State Department approval of Keystone. and we should report it accurately, which is not to say there isn't a mad tyrant at the helm. It just means that we have created a bureaucracy that's well, it's molasses in terms of trying to change it for the good or the bad. And he wants to change it for the bad. Obama got hung up in trying to change it for the good by the Congress and by the regulatory process. He's in the same sticky wicket. And I just didn't pay attention at all to that. I just like, well, whatever. This is a global model. And if anything, what we're seeing is a sunset effect of fossil fuels, not the rebirth of idiocy. And so this is the last, when the sun sets, it gets really bright, and then boom, it's dark. And that's over. And what we saw, it really, again, in the numbers, fossil fuel is gone. It's dead. 15 years, 20 years, 17, 12, I don't know. Talk to Mark Campanale at Carbon Tracker in London. But I mean, the numbers are terrible on fossil fuel, coal, gas, and oil. And gas has the longest life going ahead. EVs are doubling the rate of, the EVs are doing the same thing that solar did. Everybody underestimated solar every single year for 20 years. It outgrew the most optimistic estimates, and that's what EVs are starting to do in Europe. And so I don't feel bad at all. I feel sorry for him, because every time he says something, it just shows what a hell realm he lives in. That's his mind. He lives in that world. Every time he tweets something and uses another adjective, horrible, terrible, sad, it's talking about himself. He's not talking about the rest of the world. Yeah.
Over here.
Hi there. I really appreciated all that you said, and it's very powerful to hear that empowering women and girls and understanding their knowledge of reproduction will help so much. And then I just wonder what your discussions around the other half of the equation in educating boys has been. My name's Ellen.
Hi, Ellen. Yeah. Again, when we modeled things, we had to have data. And the data is really poor on educating boys. No, seriously, it's very poor. There's articles and there's pieces and there's anthropology, but there isn't those kind of studies that we had for girls and women.
How much we're behind in bringing us all into a relative stasis around how we treat each other.
Yeah, I agree.
Ron, here, put Ron in the middle here. He's bad.
Hi, Ron Stoltz. We met probably 20 years ago at GBN. So I worked as a scientist in the DOE laboratories. I think embedded in your talk is a great success, but also a cautionary tale, so I just wanted to illuminate those. One of the greatest talks I heard about 20 years ago was that climate change was an intergenerational issue. So we had to look for models in history, how we carry forward intergenerational themes, ideas, and tenets. And one of them was religion, which I think we've gone too far down. And I only say that by way of 2047, I'll be 99, so hopefully by then I'll have a number of grandchildren and I can personally do the intergenerational thing, so that's a kudo. The other thing that worries me a great deal, and there's a question at the end of this, and that's the concept of data and plans. And it appears now that data is debased. If you use the word data, somebody in some parts of the country and even other countries are going to basically argue against that. And when I came to that was that in the progressive societies, people become doctors or lawyers or into the analytical professions. But in the more conservative parts of the country and societies, they become influencers, advertising, marketing, and the like. And I've tried to find a synthesis between the two. So my question is, have you thought about a movie or a series of movies?
I didn't see that one coming. A lot of people are thinking about a movie, and some really good filmmakers. I want to say one thing, though, about data. The models will be published. They're open source. you can change the dashboard, you can change the inputs, you can localize them, you can regionalize them. We say in the book, we are not right. No one's right about the future. What we say is, look at here, we did our best. You can take it and you can change it. You can adapt it. We're not here to lord over anyone that we know and they don't, or that we have better data. Our data came from the rest of the world. Didn't come from us. We didn't create the data. We use other people's data. I says edited.
Hey, Paul. Yeah.
In the back here after that. Go ahead.
Paul, thank you so much. My name's Gary Musinski. I'm a citizen. And I'm curious, you've laid out this amazing data, I think we can use that word here, and just incredible research, and I'm curious how, when we think about implementing this on a global scale, what's the vehicle for doing that? Politically, globally, what are you envisioning?
You know, honestly, I don't envision anything at all. What we have found so far, and it's 3 weeks before pub date. I haven't seen a book, okay? And 3 weeks before pub date, people are envisioning already. So the Secretary General of the British Commonwealth, Janet Scotland, the Baroness Janet Scotland from Dominica, is adopting Drawdown as a template to reverse global warming and to generate economic and ecological regeneration in the 52 nations that comprise the Commonwealth of Nations, which is 1/3 of humanity and 1/4 the landmass. That's already happened. So our research team, where we're going, this is not the end, this is the beginning from our point of view. This is just the beginning. We have economic data, and we have obviously carbon, and we have a great crew, a great team, and where we're going now is jobs policy and economic complexity, which is to say, that's a very good question, your question. It's exactly the right question, because that's where the rubber hits the road. You can do this all day long, but remember though, what we modeled are things that are being implemented. We say it's possible because it's happening, not because we think it should happen. It is happening. So the question is our scaling too optimistic or pessimistic, or is it right on? And what will be the uptake? But what we've seen, I think, again and again, is that these technologies and techniques, once at a certain point, they just break out and they have a life of their own because they just are better for people, place, water, health, security, jobs, you just name it. And I think we're in that cycle right now. So. But that's where our research is going next. And we get to work with, 52 nations at least anyway, and use their economies and their political systems as a way to test our research and use their data to model what we're looking at. So anyway, great question.
Thank you.
It's good. Get with this to Stuart. No, Stuart in the back there, and then this woman here in the front.
Hi, Stuart Brand, Long Now Foundation. It's an impressively inclusive list, and it's great because you get to feel like there's so many things that one can work on. I'm curious, in the course of this, what things surprised you by not making the list, or maybe surprised other people by not making the list?
God, what's that? Do you remember, Chad? I mean, biofuels. Yeah, biofuels. Definitely. Say more about that. We just couldn't find a positive carbon impact. We saw a circle, but we didn't see the positive impact. I was at Boeing, by the way, 3 weeks ago, and gave a talk to 250 EHS people, and they loved the whole everything. And then the last question was biofuels, because they're doing biofuel planes that actually are electric planes. I mean, it's even more interesting. And they asked about biofuels, and we said, no, it didn't make the cut, sorry. And they actually laughed, but because they're so devoted to it. But yeah, I think that was one of the biggest ones. We just knew that. Water was another one. We live in California where the amount of electricity that goes to pumping and moving our water around is extraordinary. Conversely, if you don't use the water, you have big energy savings. It's really, California is so different than the rest of the world in that respect. The rest of the world does not have the energy intensity per acre foot of water that we have here. That was another one that fell off the list because we were sure waterless urinals and this and that would just be right up there. They didn't make the cut. Yeah. By the way, I want to say, Penguin, when they found out, we were in the same building where Stuart did the last, it wasn't the last, but the last Whole Earth catalog in 1971, won the National Book Award, and Penguin was his publisher. I have to tell you, Stuart, when they found out that we were in the same building and doing this was not really a catalog, but it is in a way, it really is, they were like, whoa, 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 whoa. Some of that juju would rub off on us. And
This over here.
Hello, my name's Amaru Rodriguez, and I work at Autodesk in the creative brand team. So first of all, congratulations to the tremendous team that was behind this amazing presentation. And then my question is really around as a young professional. I've always been an environmental activist since high school, but I've never had the narrative of you can do this for your profession. I never, it was almost like the artist thing. And because this is being recorded, my question is really pragmatic. It's what are the resources that you see for the young professionals, one, and two, how do you see AI and machine learning kind of using this data-centric way of looking at climate change very non-biasly? Where do you see that heading?
well, the second question is what I call a Wizard of Oz question, which is like, I have no idea, and if I answer it, you should run, because I'm so ignorant. I could speculate, but that would just be speculation. And the first question is, in terms of young people, it's a more interesting question to me, which is that I feel like this, I'm not going to tag a generation. I don't like tagging them with X's and Y's and millennials. I just think that's, we're a continuum of people, and some 50-year-olds I know are like millennials, and some millennials I know are acting like senior citizens. So let's be real. I think that that there is, though, this generational sort of skepticism, or that's not really working for me. The political system isn't working for them at all, and it was more acceptable to older generations. And the same thing around climate, which is, I feel like you have an interesting split here, which is a generation who knows darn well it's got to do something and really feels that intensely, but is not sort of buying into the patois and the lingo and the jargon. And there's a climate mafia. I'll have to say it. There's a climate mafia. It has controlled the conversation and the funding. And, Oh, I'm not going to say who. I'm just saying it really does. And I just feel like when we were looking at it, we're just saying there's just a gap between what they're saying, and I listened to Christiana Figueres, yesterday in NPR, and we decarbonize this, we need to decarbonize this and decarbonize this and this and this, and Mission 2020 and this and that. And it's like we haven't heard new language around this for a long, long time. So I feel like the generations, the younger generations, have an opportunity to reimagine. And what's happening here is reimagination. The next book we come out with is 60 More Coming Attractions. This is about reimagining. And I feel like, and I say this in the book, that there's two ways to look at climate change. It's happening to you or for you. You choose. It's your preposition. Because if it's happening to you, you're the object, the victim, you got the short end of the stick. My ancestors did it, I wasn't involved. How could they do that? They're so stupid. And but what we say is that we were all born innocent, and people made innocent choices. And now we know so much. And once you know, you make a choice. But if you think it's happening for you, think about that. Then what happens? First of all, you take 100% responsibility. Why not? It gets rid of all the energy going to blame and shaming and pointing fingers and castigating other people. And then you're free to reimagine the world that you live in and how you relate to place and people and food and everything that makes human life worthwhile and beautiful and extraordinary. And that's, to me, the gift of that is there for young generation.
So we'll go to Gil here, and then we're going to go Ryan, and then is someone way in the back there? We'll get to you guys. And then we got to start winding up at some point here, but let's get a few more questions in here. Off? Oops, plug it in.
We on? Okay. Hi. Yeah. Hi, Paul. Gil Friend from Natural Logic and Gradient Capital. Thank you so much for this. I've been waiting to see this for years. I'm delighted that it's everything I expected it would be. And I'm willing to wait 3 more weeks, but just barely. It echoes for me the work that a lot of us did 45 years ago with Bucky Fuller in the World Game Workshop. Similar kind of planetary vision, big scale, solution focused, do the math. And the conclusion then in 1972 was that we could do it, as the conclusion is now. I'm really struck that with all you've said about doing the math, you've done something that's very unmath-like here. We're not rational beings. We think we are. We think we make decisions based on facts. But in fact, you've told the story of an invitation to imagination, which is even more powerful, I think, than the math. Which takes me to the question, you started getting to it in the last little bit of the conversation, which is not a pragmatic question. What can you tell us about your emotional journey in the 4 or 5 years of this work?
Well, back a little bit. Very good question. I mean, the Buckminster Fuller was could, and what the difference is we're saying are. We are doing it. So that's the difference right there, as opposed to. So I just want to make that distinction from 45 years ago. But by Amanda, who co-founded Drawdown with me, is now the ED of BFI, the Buckminster Fuller Institute, and David McConville is here, who's also, And by the way, I forgot to call out Deborah Raphael. I don't know if she's here, but yeah. Oh yeah, there you are. She's one of our advisors too. City of San Francisco Environmental. She's like great. Anyway, but getting back to the question, I think that there's a humorous part there when at a certain point, I think both Amanda and Chad, Crystal wasn't there then, I'm not excluding you, but because it was early on. And we said, gosh, I wonder why nobody's done this. It just seems so obvious. Like, duh, not like, and complex, yes, but still, end of the day, pretty straightforward, And then I don't know when it was where we were just like up to our eyeballs, and looking at the deadline and the funding and the staffing, and we looked at each other and said, now we know why no one's done this. It was really hard. And we, on an emotional level, we didn't get funding. The funders were like, oh, let's see what you do. And even now, with all due respect, we have these 10-figure, 9-figure, we got these foundations and, have more money than, just a lot of money, put it that way. And they want all our data. Okay, but they don't offer an RFP or anything, like, just, can we have the data? And we're just going, the last essay in the book, it's a beautiful essay written by Janine Benyus, who is our vice chair and just, amazing, amazing woman, biologist. And it's called Reciprocity. And it's a beautiful essay about how nature works. It's about reciprocity. It's not about, competition. And I think, the what's come out, and again, Amanda gave me the first line of my next book, which is called Carbon. But the first sentence is totally taken from Amanda, which is, carbon is a molecule that holds hands and collaborates. And it's so true. It's the most gregarious molecule. It can come to a party and say, I'm going to go to another party. And I'm kelp. Oh, now I'm a fish. Oh, now I'm at the fish market. Now I'm being eaten. Okay, now I'm poop. I'm going into this, out to the bay. I mean, carbon is just like having a ball out there, becoming life, and all its manifests in infinite forms. And I think what we feel and see is that the crisis, what global warming is calling out for us to do, is to collaborate and hold hands. Really, and to get off our high horse and stop making people wrong. Listen to them. Just listen to what they're saying. Doesn't mean you agree, but to listen, to draw in, to integrate, to connect, to link. Because when you look at all our, especially our land use solutions, or food solutions involved, it's all about this complex interconnection and reciprocity and symbiosis. And we have to practice that as people, which we're not very good at. But I think that is the gift of global warming. To me, it's a gift because it's feedback. We did it. It's feedback. All systems without feedback, become stupid. So we became stupid. Now we're becoming brilliant, I think, and intelligent. And that brilliance and intelligence is covered up by the way the media reflects back to us. And it reflects, the 7 deadly sins and our lowest common denominator. And just keeps going in our face, and we tweet about it and talk about it and do news feeds about it, but it's just like, So for me, it's like it was a really hard thing to do and very difficult for all of us. And we wouldn't have had it any other way.
We got Ryan in the back, and we're just going to take a few more questions and allow you then all to connect up and have a few last drinks towards the end here. But Ryan, go ahead.
Ryan Phelan. Paul, amazing work. And I guess I'm back to the math again. I'm sorry to take you back down to. The question I had is, for all of these different interventions, I don't know what other word I call them, but as you look at them, some of them are on very steep trajectories already, electric vehicles. And some probably need a lot of nudging along, like educating girls. How did you factor in the modeling for that? Is it over a period of time from the past? And how much is a projected trend that is today versus
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone was different. We didn't use straight lines. And we looked at the past, and we looked at what was happening now, and some things do have inflection points, some things don't. Going back to, say, land use, for example, those who are very powerful expositories and promoters of land use solutions, soil carbon, it's the buzzword for good reason. But they project, uptake that's fantastic, and really amazing uptake. We don't see that at all. We don't see Somalian pastoralists having, rotational grazing. It's just like this sort of bizarre projection out into the rest of the world. So again, on that level, we try to be very, very conservative in terms of our growth projections. So I think in some ways, some people are very disappointed in our data. Like, oh no, it's much, much better. You didn't do this and that. Okay, that's fine, but our methodology was consistent across the board. And you're right, some things are runaway right now. But even then, on solar, we used the high estimates, but we didn't use the Greenpeace estimate, which is even higher, And even then, it came in number 8 or 10 or 6, depending how you aggregate them. And again, the thing about the math is to get rid of bias. It's not that we're just math people, but we want to efface our personal beliefs or feelings or what we love or what we don't like, or we just want to get that out, so that the math and the models, maybe that's a better word than math, was really available and meaningful and useful to everyone, not just to a small group or yeah.
Okay, we're going to take the last question there from. There you go, Jeff.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Devin McIntyre. You touched on it a little bit with nuclear. This was a wonderful presentation and a relatively straightforward, albeit complex, accounting. I'm curious about some of the externalities of the proposed solutions, and perhaps more importantly, the system dynamics of these solutions. Did you look at kind of dependencies, feedback loops, et cetera? And what did they say about the approach that we should take for these solutions?
Yeah, good questions. A lot of questions there. We could spend another half hour on that one. What we did with the models, first of all, is once we modeled the solution, then we had to take away double counting. So that was easy. That's not difficult. Then system dynamics, which is difficult, but extremely important. And the reason we didn't have the final data until 8 or 9 weeks ago, or whatever it was, is because of that. I mean, you can do them singly, atomistically, but once you get into system dynamics, it gets very, very complex. In terms of externalities, we have two types of externalities. We have the major ones, which we call regret solutions. Like the externalities are so, obvious, that we point to them and we call them out in the content. Then you have what we call yeah buts. Yeah, but look at, and not everything is a perfect shining, golden ball of light. Not at all. That these solutions have side effects, or they have spillover effects, on things. And so we try in our content. There's one of the things that actually my editor and the Penguin called out that they liked when they were reading it, is that we're not just there being a rah-rah team. We're saying, look at this is this and this and this, and this is the history. On that woman, the one with that little tiny photograph on the right side was the first solar panel in 1884 in New York City. And so we try to also do the history, so we show that these things have deep roots. That was a selenium, I think a cadmium selenium CAD-cell. But and what's so interesting about that is in 1882, the first coal-fired electric plant went up in the United States as well. So within 2 years, you had coal and solar, and even then people were writing about who would win. And I kind of wanted to put in the thing, I didn't. It's like, solar won. Because it really has, it just took a while. And, but the way, when you read it, I think you'll get that, a sense of balance. When you look at the methodology, which will be published on the website, then I think you'll really like to see you'll enjoy the complexity, put it that way, and the very issues that you raise were paramount all the time in terms of numbers, which is why for even a year I would give talks and people say, well, what's the numbers? What's the numbers? And I said, no, we don't know. We wouldn't give numbers out because it just wasn't right, Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight.
Well, really, really a wonderful evening. Now, there's still drinks. There's more, actually, desserts coming out here. There's time here to mingle and actually talk about these awesome ideas. And I will say, we're going to also have the video up so you can spread the word after this. And next month, we've got Brian Bellendorf here, who's going to be doing blockchain and all the different ways that actually blockchain is going to connect up with all kinds of things in all kinds of different fields. So anyhow, for now, let's just give Paul a great final clap. That's awesome.